to this morning's Scottish Police Authority Resources Committee. A particular welcome to colleagues from the Scottish Police Authority, to colleagues from Police Scotland, from Scottish Government and HMICS. Many thanks also to all colleagues for the preparation and submission of the papers. Just a gentle reminder that members have read all the papers, so introductory remarks should be kept to a minimum and really focus on any particular points that haven't been included in the reports, or any indeed changes since the reports were written. This will help make sure that we move the agenda forward and that members get an appropriate time to raise any points or questions that they have. I haven't received any apologies for this morning, and I'd invite now anyone with any declarations of interest or connections to declare them now, please. No? Okay, thank you. In accordance with the reasons outlined in the private papers and as per section 20 of the SPA standing orders, I would like to invite members to agree to taking agenda items 7 through to 12 inclusive in private. Are members agreeable?
Yeah. Yes,
thank you very much. And we haven't taken any formal committee business in private or conducted anything since we last met formally as a committee in June. So that takes us on to item number 2, the minute and actions from our meeting in June. Can I invite members to approve those minutes as an accurate record? Yep, okay, thank you very much. Moving on to the action log, we had 4 open actions on the action log. All 4 are proposed for closure. 3 of them are related. They relate to the change and transformation work and the benefits reporting process that is still very much work in progress, and we've got 2 substantive items on that later on in the agenda. I'm content, if members are, that we close the outstanding actions from last time. But I would ask that we have a further action at our November meeting to present the revised benefits realisation framework, articulating how benefits will be captured, measured and reported for the portfolio. Is that acceptable, Breda, to you?
Yes, it is. I genuinely look forward to going through that with you, and I will keep Scott fully briefed in preparation for that. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Members content to close those actions? Yep. Thanks very much. That takes us on then to the substantive items on the agenda, and the first of which is the financial monitoring and planning item 3.1, quarter 1 financial monitoring report. Lynn, over to yourself, please.
Thank you, Chair. Morning, everyone. So, Chair, as you said, taking the report as read, so I was just going to quickly call out the key highlights. Year-to-date position is an actual underspend of 1.1 million against the year-to-date budget, mainly attributable to timing. The overall forecast is break-even in line with funding. The main variances are shown on page 4 of the report. Just really to highlight that the Q1 forecast position is challenging. There are a number of emerging pressures that are outlined in the report, including overtime, ill health and non-pay expenditure. Obviously, pay discussions are also ongoing, which will have an impact on the final outturn position itself as well. So just to say that all of that will be closely monitored as we move through the coming weeks and months, and we'll report that back as appropriate. Page 19 of Appendix A does sort of highlight the key threats and opportunities around the forecast position as it stands at the minute. Capital at the end of period 3, we've spent £11.3 million to date. That's 16% of our forecast compared to 12% last year. So we are seeing a trajectory of increased spend in the early months of the financial year. And obviously there's still a lot of work ongoing around the capital space to really sort of push in-year spend, but also capital planning as we move into future financial years. There's been yeah, there's been a lot of work done through the capital planning task force, and that will feed in through to the budget updates, etc., that will come forward at future meetings. So overall, the capital forecast is in line with our funding. It still requires a bit of slippage to be achieved over the financial year, but we are again monitoring that alongside budget holders and capital investment group. And then finally, reform forecast again is in line with funding available. Members will remember that the reform budget was set with £16.2 million of slippage included in the budget, so approximately half of that has been identified to date. And again, working closely with the transformation team, change, digital, etc., around really looking into those forecasts in terms of the remaining slippage that is to be achieved over the remainder of the financial year. So really, that's all I was looking just to call out from the report itself. So happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Many thanks, Lynn. As you say, a challenging position, not just for this year, but going into future years as well. I'll open up for comments or questions from members. Alistair.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thanks, Lynn, for your report. I think over the years that I've certainly been involved, we've always been impressed by the agility in terms of delivering such a complex and big budget. I've got a couple of specific questions here. First one is in relation to the employer's national insurance, which was partially funded, I think 60% it says, by Scottish Government last year, but the remaining approximately £10 million needs to be found within Police Scotland. Now this year you've been doing that through the reduction in employee pension contributions, but you've got to look for a sustainable approach to this £10 million. And when you see that alongside all the other savings that need to be delivered within Police Scotland, I just wondered if there was any specifics on that, to build that in permanently to the budget. So that was my first question. And my second question was, again, in terms of the resource budget, was in relation to some of the emerging challenges this year. So ill health retirals have been mentioned as being above that was anticipated. So what's driving that, and what's changed so that it wasn't anticipated? And the other one was in relation to overtime. It looks like unplanned overtime has been increasing. So what's driving that? So that was my three questions at the outset, if that's okay.
Yep, I'm happy to come in initially in that, and then if anybody else wants to come in after that. But certainly in terms of the 10 million that was that you mentioned around the national insurance contributions. So yeah, as you mentioned, the gap in the funding has been covered this year through that reduced superannuation employer contributions. So obviously the work is ongoing at the minute around the budget submission into government for 26-27. And going forward, essentially to feed into Scottish Government's spending review that they are undertaking. So all of that will be captured as part of that, and as part of the budget work that's ongoing around the financial planning element, in terms of, like as you say, dealing with all the pressures that we're seeing in terms of whether it's pay, non-pay, efficiencies, etc. So just to give that assurance that is all part of the discussions at the minute, and will feature as part of any submissions into government around budgets and spending review. Just in terms of the ill health retirals, what we do see with that budget is demand led, and we always call it out as one of the variable budgeting assumptions, because it does depend on the number of panels that are had in a month and when they're taken, etc. And at one point, particularly I think the COVID years, we had a bit of a backlog and made a bit of a catch up. So that is a variable line, and it is just due to the activity in the system. But I see ACC Mears has got his hand up. I don't know if he wants to come in that point specifically before I move on.
No, Lynn, it was more the overtime, just to offer a perspective on that. Apologies.
Okay, no problem. It was just in case it was that. So, yeah. So again, what we are trying to do around the ill health is obviously work with P&D, etc., to understand the pipeline when panels might be held in terms of what that will look like this financial year and into future financial years. So there's a lot of work ongoing in that space in terms of that pipeline that's within that area. I don't know if Tim, do you want to come in now around the overtime?
Yeah, it's just on the overtime bit. So I think there's probably a couple of things that are driving that. One is just operational demand. So Operation Portalage, our response to kind of the feud across the Central Belt, has been a massive overtime spend by us to simply counter that threat. So that was a lot of our specialist resources in SCD, but also an awful lot of uniform visible resource, particularly in Edinburgh and Glasgow, and clearly we had a real responsibility to do that. The second bit is, I would say, is just being mindful that we have seen over the last 3 years this reduction in officer numbers. So from 17,234 down to 16,500, so even that 100 coming out this year has presented some challenges around just getting the numbers right. I would say at local policing level at the moment, we are carrying more vacancies there than would be ideal, just with the way recruitment has gone. So we are using overtime at times to backfill some of those gaps. So the model's under pressure at that frontline bit, and which is why we're looking to bring in the new model to try and ease some of that. So again, the overtime will have been based on us probably having higher numbers in the likes of response policing than we do currently, and as a result, we're having to use overtime to fill some of the gaps. So it is a sign of pressure, that's what I would say, ultimately.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for those.
Alistair, do you want to come back in?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Appreciate the responses and I understand them, in particularly in relation to overtime, how you're using that to smooth out the organisation as you transition to your new delivery model. It's just my only thought on that is thinking about timescales in the future and thinking about how overtime is realistically budgeted going forward. So I'm content with the responses I've had across all my questions. I've got one final question, Chair, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, I'm just conscious that DCC Smith has raised her hand. Did you want to come in on any of those points first before Alistair raises his final point?
Thanks, Chair. All I was going to say was the overtime point. Tim has summarised that really well, and Alan chairs an overtime management group just to keep track of that, and it's not ideal, but I'm confident with the new model and the transition to that and the work that Tim and the team are doing, that will help us understand that in a much better way moving forward. The ill health retirals is really interesting, and we are pushing those through it quicker, I think it's probably fair to say, as opposed to the more sort of static process that we've seen over the last couple of years. And we're trying to do that to exit colleagues who rightly want to leave the organisation in that particular way. It's not easy, but we're trying to make the process shorter, which is probably where you would see a higher spend than usual in that at the moment. And as Lynn says, it's really difficult to predict, obviously, in terms of timescales, etc. But I think that's probably the pressure that we are applying in terms of making sure that that system and that process is quicker than it has been in the past. So we might see that continue for the next sort of 6 or 12 months, just I guess to sort of put a marker down around there. Thank you.
Thank you. Back to you, Alistair.
Yeah, and thanks for that, DCC Smith. Appreciate that insight as well. And my final question was just in relation to the recent visit by President Trump. I haven't seen any formal debriefs on that, but my impression is that it was an excellent policing response from Police Scotland. Within this financial report, it doesn't cover any of the costs involved in that I can see. So just wondering, when does that come forward, and ultimately, where will the funding come from?
Lynn?
Yeah, I can come in around the reporting. So this report covers up to the period of to end of June, and then obviously the visit was in July. So we will start to see actual costs probably coming through like August payroll by the time it flows through the system for Police Scotland deployments, and then probably into September for mutual aid deployments. So we probably won't have a full understanding of the final actual cost until late September, early October. By the time all that is flows through. So period 4 report won't have anything around have anything around the costs in that either. So it'll probably be the period 5 August report where we'll start to see actual costs coming through. And then just around the funding for that, obviously discussions are ongoing at the minute with Scottish Government around the funding. The Chief Executive has written to Scottish Government around that, and we're just liaising with them closely around, the various aspects of that. So that work is ongoing at the minute.
Okay, thank you for that. That's all the questions I have at the moment, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks, Alistair. Angela, thanks for your patience. Over to you.
Not at all, thank you. And thanks, Lynn, for a comprehensive report as ever. I wanted to ask a bit about capital, please. I noticed that there is, so the overall RAG rating is amber, and I acknowledge that the spend is slightly up in where we were last year, but we're still 26% behind the capital plan, 26% of the capital plan is 1 month or more behind delivery. I wonder, Lynn, if you can maybe say what colleagues are doing to try and bring that back online, and could we actually go above the slippage target that has been set? And my second question is really about the spend in particular from estates, and how that's been managed and monitored, what assurance the committee can take in terms of the capital spend associated with the estates plan.
Thanks very much. James, do you want to come in first?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'll pick up on the estate question in particular, and Lynn could maybe pick up on some of the wider stuff. So we have had a bit of a slower start than had been planned. We've had some personnel changes, but we have now got a more steady position within the team. We've redesigned some processes. We've redesigned our reporting and monitoring, and I think finance colleagues would agree that estates are now proactively managing their own capital programme, whereas in the past you maybe saw they were quite reactive and finance were pushing them on it. And you should now start to see a better spend coming through on estates. And obviously I'll not be here by the year end, but having looked at the plans and what's in the pipeline, I would expect to see it land somewhere over 25 million, which would be an awful lot more than where we've been in the past. And I suppose where some of that confidence is starting to come is that I've seen the period 4 figures. So for the month of July, estate spend was 2.8 million. Now at a run rate, that's over 30 million a year. That's a place we've never been before. Now that isn't a fluke. That isn't an outlier. That is where we're now starting to get to. Should start to see that sustained level of spend. And in actual fact, one of the items for the estate this year is Capital Park, which is the new fleet workshop in Edinburgh, which should have completed in July and it didn't. So, with that, we would have been 4.5, getting on for £5 million of a spend, because that's obviously will be capitalised under IFRS 16. So I think estates, it does, it's right to raise it. I think it's right to continue to monitor it closely. But I think with the changes in personnel, the change processes, the tighter grip and management oversight, and the addition of the new Chief Officer of Estates starting on the 1st of September, that should be in a far better place than it has been. That said, what my reflection on where the estates team is at absolute capacity. That if we're going to see a move from away from repairs and maintenance, which is what we've got this year, but some enhancements around building refurbishments, and move to proper transformative new asset replacement, then that's going to require a different operating model, because the skill set that we have in house and the capacity is at its maximum at the moment. So I'm confident that you'll see a really strong performance on the estate this year, but it needs to move to a different level for future years, and you'll start to see that come through in some of the capital proposals, I think, over the coming weeks and months. Thanks.
Sorry, could I just ask?
Do you want to come back on that?
Pauline, yeah.
Yeah.
So I suppose thanks for that, James, and all the very best in your new position. Well, sorry to see you go, and thanks for all your work. Can I just ask a wee bit then about the prioritisation, because it's not that long since we agreed the Estates Master Plan, and the associated workforce needs that would go along with that. How are you balancing the two, the prioritisation and the allocation of the workforce that you do have? Because there's always a strain. We never have the resources that we need, do we, to really do everything that we would want to do or like to do, but that's why we're prioritising. And I'm just also interested in some of the operational issues that are arising as a consequence of some of the delays, and in particular, I'm conscious that there's a delay on the criminal toxicology work that forensics have commissioned.
So I can start, and then I think maybe DCC Smith is looking to come in. I suppose what I mean with regard to master plan is that the team that we have at the moment, that team is of a size and its capability is more in repairs and maintenance. And the master plan, if that was to go ahead in its current form, the amount of money that we're spending this year on the estate is what we would need to continue to spend just to do proper repairs and maintenance on the buildings that we're keeping and some of the upgrades. And we'd be looking for enhanced spend over and above the kind of 25, 30 million to get up to 50, 60, 70 million, depending on the ambition of the organisation. But that then would require, a different model, a delivery partner or something like that, or if it was going to be done in-house to really build out the capability. So at the moment, we're still in a kind of transition period where the team are really focusing on doing the right level of maintenance on the buildings where, there's been a proactive decision to keep them for the time being, and that's constantly under review. And then on the building enhancements, that the buildings that we're keeping, we've said we would upgrade them to get them into a reasonable condition for the longer term. That prioritisation has been done in conjunction with operational colleagues, and it remains under review. So there's 11 buildings, I think, at the moment that are getting some internal improvements this year. That was done, operationally. But I think as we go forward, the overall governance arrangements around making sure that there is that absolute alignment and plugging more so into the overall change programme will be important going forward. But at the moment, the stuff that we're doing in the current year really doesn't impact upon that. But we wouldn't be able to get too much further down the road without there being that really strong interconnectedness. And that's probably a good point to hand over to DCC Smith.
Thanks very much, James. And just to remind folks that we do have an update on the Estates Master Plan later in today's agenda as well. DCC Smith?
Yeah, I was going to say I'm happy to leave that to later, but I suppose just to say that organisationally the decision now with the work that James and the team have done is how we progress the transformation plan, and that's obviously all linked to the target operating model work, etc., what that looks like in terms of our estate footprint, and the decision will be made at SLB as it comes up with the chief shortly in terms of what direction we choose organisationally in terms of how we manage the estates transformation plan, because it's ambitious, it's long. Do we build, what those options are, and we've got lots of options to discuss and go through, but ultimately we need to make a decision as to whether we work with a strategic partner or whether that's something that we build in-house in terms of capability. And at the moment, James has done a really good job in terms of recruiting an individual who's got a lot of experience in that. So, we're really excited to have her in the team to be able to help us make those decisions. But ultimately, the first point is which way we progress as an organisation with developing the transformation plan as opposed to the estates master plan and what that looks like. We need to be sure that we will get the continued investment in that. It's a considerable amount of money. We wouldn't want to be in the position where we couldn't guarantee that moving forward. So those discussions are also ongoing as well. But just to reassure members, we are absolutely having all of those discussions, and it will be the decision around the direction of travel, which of course we'll discuss with members as and when we've had the discussion internally around options and progress. But I also just wanted to add, I chair the capital task force. We had that yesterday and we had a big discussion in terms of estates. The team are really focused on both juggling the kind of business as usual as James outlines, and the transformation work moving forward is a big consideration for us around spend. I'm confident they've got a really good plan in terms of that and the spending footprint. We went through both estates, fleet, operational policing, lots of other areas of business in terms of their plans, any slippage and delays and spend timing, etc. So we've got a really tight grip on that at the moment, just in general around the capital spend, probably more so than we've had over the years, just to reassure members of that.
Thank you. Angela, do you want Lynn to respond to your wider point around capital spend?
Please.
Yeah, no problem. So, yeah, Angela, as you mentioned, that there's the projects that are currently sitting within the amber and red. So just obviously as part of the Q1 forecast, there is still just under £9 million of slippage to be achieved to deliver the overall funded position. So we would expect some of the spend within those two areas to contribute to that. And as I said, we'll monitor that closely, around the capital planning task force that DCC Smith referred, and also capital investment group. But just overall, the report obviously presents the revised Q1 forecast on page 11. So what we can see in the business as usual areas is that the forecast is pretty much on budget, but there's been a lot of movements within. So if things have slipped, it's been reallocated elsewhere, and that's really, within the detailed plans that are going through the capital planning task force. Overall, so and then within the change world there is a bit of an underspend there, but it's for very specific reasons around things like price, etc., staff capitalisation. So that is all getting closely monitored through the task force in particular. So what we will do from period 4 onwards is we will then be reporting against the Q1 forecast as opposed to original budgets, because again, just as organisationally dynamic and flexible, just to manage, that overall position. And then just on your final point around that, if we got to the position where we ended up with more slippage than 9 million, obviously part of the conversations around the future capital planning is always think about what can be brought forward in terms of, like, where could we switch spend out between the financial years, which we had to do at the end of 24-25. So rather than the annual looking at it in silos, as we know the annual budget settlements do give us that kind of tunnel view. We are really looking at that longer term planning around the capital and how it all kind of flows between the financial years. So just to give that assurance that is getting looked at as part of the capital planning task force, and we would be reallocating as appropriate through the capital investment group to deliver the overall budget.
Thank you. That's reassuring, and I really welcome the introduction of the task force and the improvements that will come as a result of that. So thank you, Lynn. Thanks, Pauline.
Thanks very much. I think that was a really helpful conversation, giving us more assurance around estates and the spend in capital, given that you mentioned, we have been in previous years slightly in the position of having to kind of move spend between different programmes and between different years. I think the paper mentions that there is now a pipeline of predicted spend. It would be helpful if that could be shared with members, so that we can see how that profiles in detail over the year, given the challenges that we've had in previous years. Lynn, sorry.
Yeah, so certainly just around that, the work in terms of that longer capital planning is actively going through the internal capital investment groups at the minute. So it certainly is the intention that will be shared in due course, whether it's resources committee or board, or but and almost definitely through the budget development group itself. But that's absolutely the intention there.
Thanks very much. Tom, over to yourself.
Thanks, Chair. Personally, I take a lot of comfort from the reassurance that we've given today. No doubt we'll have further discussion around the estates as a separate item. My question's in terms of the capital budget again. It probably reflects where we see the greatest risk in terms of budget at the moment. The 71 million capital allocation included capital receipts. So my question is around confidence in the level of those receipts coming in and timeliness, and what would be the impact on that capital budget if there is significant slippage in there. I've seen that, for instance, in estates sales, disinvestment is taking a lot longer than we expected. So what's the risk in relation to capital receipts?
Yeah, I can certainly come in from the financial perspective. So in terms of Q1 forecast, that is based on capital receipts of 1.1 million. There's probably about 400 or 500 of that already banked to date. So just under half is already on the books, if you like. In terms of the future receipts that are included within that, there's probably about a 200k risk in there, but we're also aware of other things that are potentially, like around housing, etc., that might, compensate for that. So I would say, based purely on what's in the Q1 forecast, there's probably a 200k risk, but we're looking at other options around that as to how that would potentially balance out if other sales went ahead out with that.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I mean, it's not really so much for this year, but the point that Tom makes is going to become increasingly more challenging in the years ahead if the master plan is delivered around big new asset acquisitions and big significant disposals. And I think that's why it's important that dialogue with government continues, because whilst we want to benefit from the monetary value of the capital receipts, we do want to try and get that agreement that government manages the timing risk, because it's obviously its capital spending power is an awful lot greater than ours. So if you took an example of something like Fettes, now I'm making this number up, I'm not saying it's worth this, but just for round numbers sake, say it was £20 million. Well, if we had that in our budget this year, you're taking a pretty big risk if you were going to spend 70 on the basis of getting that 20, and then it slipped into the following year, and then you've suddenly got a £20 million hole. So as I say, we want to try and keep the value of the receipt, but agree with government that over the next 5 years we're looking to make disposals of a value of X, and then try and get certainty into our planning by getting capital funding for that equal to that value of the disposals, and then when the disposals come through government, then keep the receipts. So there's no net detriment to them, but they're far better placed to manage something like a £20 million receipt, whereas because it's completely immaterial to them, whereas for us it's highly material. So that's something that I think it's important to continue to take that forward.
Thanks, Tom.
Yeah, thanks, James. That's in essence, you've captured the risk that I was trying to explore myself, and very clearly articulated that it's probably an emerging risk as we go forward in that agreement with the Scottish Government. It needs to be a priority. So where are we in those discussions with SG? Are they active?
Yes, those discussions are active. They've been ongoing now for the theoretical conversations have been going on for probably about 12 months through this capital planning work that's been done at the moment. That's where we're trying to start to get some hard numbers on it so that we can have those conversations more meaningfully and start to talk real numbers and feed that into the capital funding for future years. So that's a live piece of work at the moment.
Thanks, James.
Thanks very much. Colleagues, many thanks for those questions and responses. There was just one thing in revenue I wanted to go back to, perhaps the most significant element of revenue, pay, and obviously pay negotiations for pay awards are still actively in progress. Lynn, I wonder if you could say a bit more about affordability for this year and going into future years as well, and how we are planning on funding those awards if negotiated to an effective settlement.
Yeah, so just overall in terms of the pay negotiations, again, discussions with Scottish Government around the funding for that, and as part of that process, that's all been discussed around Scottish Government, and again will feature as part of our submission into the spending review in terms of looking at how that will be funded on a recurring basis.
Thanks very much. Okay, I don't think there's any other questions. A really helpful update, and I'm sure, Lynn, you'll keep us appraised if there's anything significant happens between now and our next meeting in November around funding and costs incurred, particularly in respect of pay and other capital matters. So thanks very much, everybody. Moving on to item 4 then, 4.1 is the Q1 transformation report. And Breda, I think we're over to yourself.
Thank you, Chair. And if it's all right, I'll cover 4.1 and 4.2 together, and I will take your steer, Chair, at the beginning to go through points that aren't included, bearing in mind everybody has looked over the pack. So if I look at the transformation information that was submitted, I thought it would be helpful to draw out there are 2 programs of work that are currently in red. So to say a little bit more than you've had in the paper around that, and linking to particularly some of the comments that Lynn was making in terms of the capital and the reform, and linking also to the implications of some of the work being in the red. So there are 2 programs that are currently red. The first one is Enabling Policing for the Future programme. One of the projects underneath that is estates asset management, which there is a change request that has gone through Transformation Board on that. And I thought would be helpful to mention that, because in the pack you'll see that the fact that the change request has been approved by Transformation Board means that that programme of work will come back into the green. So good news from that perspective. Of course, there are implications with the change request. If you look at the financial implications, it's not very great. I think it's about a £13,000 difference, so relatively small. The big piece is the fact that the estates asset management has gone back by 13 months. So for me, the question is, what's the implication, if any, with the big piece of work that we're doing that James has been talking about in terms of the estates master plan, which is huge for us. The estates asset management is a enabler for the work that's going on with the master plan, so really significant from that perspective. So lots of conversations, you can imagine, internally, not only in terms of what's caused the delay, which I think we all probably appreciate and understand. So we're at the point now where there's a new route to tender, it's been agreed and so forth, but we know that there will be this 13-month delay. So in conversations, and James and I are working very closely together. I've had lots of conversations also with ACC Sutherland, who's the operational lead on this. And because of our focus at the moment on the upgrades in terms of maintenance work, and building enhancements, currently there should be no implication to the master plan by the 13-month delay, because of course the amount of time it's going to take for the significant work to be delivered. So I thought that was quite helpful to share that, because on paper it looks pretty good. We've got a change request that's been approved. The programme's going back into the green. However, for me, that's that question in terms of what's the implication for that. So hopefully that sets minds at ease, and we will continue to monitor this, because as James was saying, as more significant work and thinking is done in the master plan, if things move forward, then there possibly could be an implication. So we will keep close on that to monitor it. So hopefully that's helpful as an update on that. The other piece of work that I thought would be helpful to mention in the Enabling Policing for the Future programme is the ESR work. Mentioning this from a point of view of funding, because of course we're looking particularly at capital funding, but also reform funding. One of the points that Lynn mentioned earlier is that the over allocation from the original budget to the end of Q1 has been reduced, and it's currently, I think, Lynn will correct me, but I think it's 8.2 million. So that's money that's over allocated. So we are looking quite closely at pieces of work that we have not committed the spend to date with reform spending, to really get a sense of, is this going to happen? Is it prioritisation and so forth? So in terms of the ESR work, There is 1 million in the budget this year, in the reform budget for that, and a further million next year. And it was just to let you know, in terms of the dates, there is a review on the 5th of September with the EPR project board, which Alan Spears, DCC Spears, chairs, to make a decision in terms of what is our intention with that funding going forward for the rest of the year. So we will have an update for you after that. So that's the two things that I thought would be helpful to draw out in terms of enabling policing for the future. The other programme of work that is in the red is Policing in a Digital World programme. Again, I thought it would be helpful to say a little bit about that. So there's quite a few, I know you're all probably more familiar, having been around longer than I am, in terms of the pieces of work. The first piece of work that I thought would be helpful to talk about project is Fraud Strategy and Operating Model, the FRACAS. And within that, there's quite a lot of money that's allocated to it, the majority of which is reform funding. So there's 2.933 million that's reform funding against that. And top level, it's Lynn and my sort of understanding that probably will not be spent this year. That's reform spending of about 2.9 million. We're still in conversations with the project team and the SRO to confirm that very little has been spent so far. And the reality is that there's a lot of work that's going on, conversations with City of London Police in terms of what it's going to take for us to join that. And the current expectation is it's just not going to happen this year. So it will happen, but probably it's something that will move back into next year. So just to be clear, it's reform funding rather than capital. It is a big amount, and I thought it's helpful to share. From my perspective, whilst of course it delays that, it helps us, Lynn and I, to identify some of the over allocation to get us back more in line. So a positive from that perspective. So hopefully that's helpful. One that's more about capital is the digital forensics redesign. The capital's, I think, 1.35-ish million, and nothing has been spent on that to date. A lot of work has been going on in that area. 6 months ago, the Cyber and Fraud Unit was created that the digital forensics now sits within, and Chief Super Andy Patrick is sort of leading that. So lots of conversations with him around that. The reality is that the work will have shifted and the thinking's changing, so it will require another business case to determine what goes forward, and of course that will take time. I'll say a little bit more shortly in terms of front door, which I mentioned before. We had the first one of that last week, and Andy Patrick brought a paper to that, which we are considering. For me, though, the reality is, even though we've had that paper, it's different to the original. So it still needs to go back into how does that compare to other pieces of work and other priorities, rather than there's the money for this, could it be offset against that? That to me isn't a fair way of looking at it. So just being really overt with you in terms of that capital funding, our current expectation is that it probably will not be spent this year. So just to give you the sort of heads up on that. So they were the two kind of key things. There's obviously the ISO project as well, and that's been going on for years. And quite honestly, I think there's a bit of a rethink in terms of how we get real traction with that. And again, the priority and where that sits in the prioritisation for the overall transformation. So that's, for me, just an update in terms of the two programmes of work that are currently not green, to give you a little bit more, hopefully helpful understanding of that. So I'll just pause there if you've got questions on that before I say a little bit about benefits, and then I'd like to step up and tell you a little bit what we've been doing as a function to shift things at a bigger level.
Thanks very much, Breda. Just while members are considering their questions, can I just go back to the fraud strategy and operating model? You spoke about, that won't unlikely to happen this year. So what's going to be the impact on operational policing of that? Because we know that this has got significant consequences in an area of significant reports of crime, particularly cyber fraud, and a particular worry for the population. So what impact will that delay have on operational policing?
To be honest, I don't know. I wonder if Tim's able to respond to that from an operational perspective. Thank you, Tim.
Thanks. Yeah, really good question. You'll have noted for the first time in a number of years, our fraud figures are down slightly this year. So we're starting to see a leveling out of that demand. From a pure demand perspective on frontline policing, we don't see that translating through. So really the impacts around this will be mostly in the efficiency space. The majority of divisions now have fraud teams who coordinate through weekly meetings and through Andy's side of the house, and we are taking a much more joined up approach across the country, but it is ad hoc and it is inconsistent. Again, pretty much the same as what you're seeing in the local policing business case. So there is an opportunity to join that up, make it more efficient and effective. But in general terms, what I would say therefore is it's that slight efficiency bit. We could do it a little bit more efficiently. Big benefits about linking into the UK picture because fraud is a borderless crime. So that more coherent approach with City of London. And the third element is I think the real benefit then comes to a more effective service to the public through prevention, messaging, but also more assurance around level and quality of investigation, and that we're being consistent across the country. So it's probably a quality of service space, but as far as risk across the spectrum, it wouldn't be the highest one for us. So it's one in my sense. We'd rather get it right than rush into something that doesn't quite do the right job, if that makes sense, because we want to have a long-term future model to manage this because it is the new reality.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thanks very much, because I do recall the initial business case and it was really compelling in terms of the direction of travel. Thank you. Sorry, colleagues, I'm not quite sure which order people came in on, so I'll go in reverse order this time. Tom.
Thanks very much. My question is around the cyber security strategy programme, which is shown amber in a number of areas, resources, etc. And in light of the increasing publicity of organisations being subject to cyber attacks, etc., what's the implications of that status of that programme and the confidence levels of it coming back to green?
So I'm going to pass over to Andrew for that, as that's in his space. Andrew?
Apologies, I couldn't get my camera on. Yeah, thanks Tom for the question, Tom. So yeah, we've got some minor delays in that space, mainly down to supplier issues that are being handled. I think from a resourcing perspective, I think we are obviously having to be a good corporate player across the piece. So I don't see major impacts there at the moment. I think we'll kind of manage that on a business case by business case basis within the programme. But certainly from a delivery perspective, we're kind of mapping to a plan. We do have a reliance on some external parties in that space, which I think is kind of more reflective of the amber than anything else. But yeah, I mean, from our perspective, I think we're doing the right thing across our cybersecurity programmes, and obviously happy to talk more detail off table.
Yeah, I'm conscious of the security implications of having an open conversation about that. But I think a briefing to give us reassurance around cyber security would be essential for the committee.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. I'll get that over to you.
Thanks for that.
Thanks very much, Andrew. Angela.
Thank you. Just to go back to something that I referenced earlier, Chair, in the report, Breda, in the appendix, you talk about the full business case for the sustainable model for criminal toxicology, and it's at amber just now. Can I just ask, what action is being taken for that particular project. I said when at the forensics committee last week that I would ask for an update on that, particularly as the implications for the rollout of roadside drugs testing. And I just wondered, what actions are being taken to try and bring that back on track. And related to that, it was about the resources that you referred to throughout the report that are limited in various areas. And I just wonder what the issues are there. Is it funding or is it availability of the right skills to be able to progress the priorities that are laid out in your report?
Yeah, we had, thanks. We had a conversation on Monday about this exact point, because I think it's been going around in circles a little bit in terms of the criminal toxicology. So we got everyone in a room that was, part of this, including John Sheehy, our head of portfolio delivery, ACC, Sutherland, etc., and talked openly about what's getting in the way, really, of getting this moving forward, really, in the direction. From a project management perspective, we have the resources that have been allocated to it, and they are effectively working on pulling the business case together. We, of course, have a huge amount of work that's going on in the estates arena, and we've had conversations, and currently the feasibility study is being conducted. We've got estates resource that has been seconded in on a temporary basis to do that. So it is currently moving forward, and I believe that feasibility work is going on till, I think, October or thereabouts. So there is no delay at the moment in terms of doing that work. It is progressing. We have got the resource that has been allocated to it. The question is around, so how do we get the resource in place to do the full business case, which I think will take about another 10 months. And we are working on that at the moment, and we're talking about how do we resource that. Do we bring external in to do that piece of work, or do we use some of our internal estates people and obviously backfill that? So that conversation is happening. The other piece of work that is factoring into this is the pilots that are happening on the drug testing, the roadside drug testing. And there are pilots going on in a few different divisions, one of which is happening imminently in Ayrshire in Kilmarnock. So that piece of work is ongoing. The belief is that whilst they are small additional pilots, the information from that will be really helpful to ascertain what is the footprint that's going to be needed in this new laboratory. Having said that, the understanding is that even with current testing as it is, we will need a new laboratory. So it's not, do we not need one? It's what's the scale of it. So there is, my reassurance is there is a lot of conversations going on, because even though this is a long-term piece of work and it will take quite a long time to design and to build, we don't want to put any delays in that whole process. So we are actively working on managing that and having honestly lots of conversations internally to make sure that it is moving forward.
Thanks, Breda. We did have a full report at Forensics last week, which is slightly different to what you've just said. So I think maybe some alignment might be useful, just to give that assurance that things are progressing in line with the initial business case that was approved. So we'll maybe come back to that in November.
I'd be happy to, and that's why we had the conversation on Monday with a number of us in a room together, because of the feedback on what was said at the committee meeting last week. I wasn't at that. I have had feedback from John Sheehy, who was at that, and I think there is a little bit of a confusion. John, who is managing it from my perspective, assures me that the work is currently ongoing. We're on the feasibility study, that's ongoing, that is sufficiently resourced to do that piece of work. What we're talking about is how we resource the next bit. And I'm happy to talk more about that. That's my understanding. That's what I've been assured of.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Alistair?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Breda, thank you for the report and for drawing out the reasons why a couple of programmes are reporting as red at this moment in time, because obviously that's what your attention, certainly mine, is immediately drawn to. My question though is around policing in a digital world, which you've explained a lot of why it's red and what's happening in terms of trying to get back on the track over this year and next year. But one of the reasons there, it states as a failure to secure funding, stroke identify posts. So I just wonder if we could get a little bit of insight by what we mean by a failure to secure funding, because there is significant funding, both capital and reform, allocated to this, and you explained one of the parts of why the reform money might not be spent this year. So that failure to secure funding, could maybe just explain that a little bit more, please?
In short, I can't. I don't understand what that means either. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, I will check that.
Okay, that's fine if we're going to come back to that at some point. I just couldn't quite understand, just didn't quite reconcile with me.
Come back to
Thanks,
that.
Alistair. We can take that as an action away. Thanks very much again, colleagues, for your questions and your comments there. Good to see the work in progress in terms of changing the reporting format for this, Breda. I think it would be helpful, given this is a public paper, to try to minimise the use of abbreviations in the report as well going forward, but also to include, which we used to get, a profile of the spend, the kind of what we budgeted for, what was spent to date, and what the revised forecast is going forward. That would be helpful for us too. And it strikes me, just in terms of the conversation in the paper today, that there does seem to be an issue around having sufficient staffing capacity to take forward the programmes, and therefore, we need to, as we always do, look at how we prioritise those programmes. So I think it would be really helpful in November to have a paper about the prioritisation process, how that's factored in, how we can seek assurance that prioritisation is in line with the 3-year delivery plan and the 2030 vision, and how we can make sure that, from a resources committee perspective, the funding allocations and money is being spent in line with those priorities.
Happy to do that. Very happy to do that. I wanted to, if it's all right, to spend a few minutes also talking to you about, which isn't covered in papers, the bigger picture items that we've been working on, which of course includes, Chair, the prioritisation pieces. You might remember last time that we talked about we're taking a holistic approach within transformation to partly step up out of the details of the different programmatic work, and to, in effect, set ourselves up for success. So a lot of the things that we're talking about in terms of benefits, in terms of prioritisations, we need to set up processes to ensure that going forward we are managing things really effectively, and we have the right people in the right roles to do that. So I thought it would be helpful to share with you one of the things that we talked about at the last session was the front door, which was a process that my colleague Teresa came up with. The idea is it's a work reception to enable us within transformation to have sight of all of the new pieces of work that are being considered before people have gone down the route of writing, for example, an IBC. Really helpful. We had the first front door process last Thursday. I was delighted that Scott joined us to represent yourselves at that, and honestly, I know Scott's on this, was really additive in terms of the comments and the perspective that he was able to share. So the front door, we had 7 different papers that came to that. They were all relatively short. People were supported by my team to enable them to put together the relatively concise papers for us to review. And all of the people that were part of the sort of core team, after each paper, we did an assessment of the effort that would be required to deliver that and the impact on the business. So the initial thinking in terms of top level benefits, as well as we gave thought to what's the nature of the governance route that if it became a project would need to follow, whether it would need full transformation support, maybe a little bit, or just could be business led. And then we had a review at the end of the day in terms of those pieces of work. So top level, it was really an effective process. It was really helpful. It enabled a really good dialogue at the end of the day in terms of these potential new programs of work. I had a conversation with Scott afterwards, and I said it was really effective. What it does, though, is it draws my attention to one of the current issues that is highlighted even more starkly through the front door, which is our resourcing and our ability to deliver the current workload even before we look at new things. So I'll come back to the front door in a minute. I want to give you a bit of a flavour of what we've been doing in terms of prioritisation. So last time I've been working to pull together a full picture of all the current pieces of work that are ongoing within the organisation, even those that are not being led by or supported by transformation, because of course they still have an impact on people. So for all of those pieces of work, we've done a review of the effort, impact and the prioritisation, and we've also done a review, and this is me and my leadership team, done a review of what's the tier in terms of the governance route that project would need to follow. From that, I've collaboratively with the group had a look at prioritisation and therefore realignment of resources. And quite honestly, that's tricky because it's really hard to slow down or pause any of the pieces of work, because as we've been talking about today, each different piece of work has real implications if we don't, both in terms of finance and in terms of maybe more importantly, the impact on policing, if we don't continue at the pace that we're doing. So it's been quite tricky the prioritisation's been easy, it's been quite tricky to realign resources. And as I was sharing with Scott, the front door was really effective until I have a small team of people that, if you like, is a flexible resource to support anything that gets through the front door. We're in quite a dilemma. So to move that forward, I've asked Conrad and Campbell to have individual meetings with all of our programme managers over the next couple of weeks to get an even deeper understanding of workload, capacity, and even down to things like the meetings that people are attending. What can we do to free up our time to enable us to work on more value-added work? And in that process, I'm really hoping that it helps us to enable a few people that could be this task force to work on the really significant, exciting pieces of work that we're hearing about at the front door. So that work's ongoing over the next couple of weeks, and after that they'll come back to me and hopefully we'll have some sort of idea about reprioritisation and moving the front door forward. And as I've said to Scott, even though it was really effective, really powerful, the pieces of work we looked at with the front door, I'm not prepared to have another one until we've got some resources that we can align to that, because otherwise we're getting people's hopes up really that a project might move forward if we do not have the resources to fit with that. So that's one thing that's ongoing, and I'll give you more information, particularly around prioritisation at the November session. The other big thing is around benefits, which I know we've been talking a lot about. and there's the paper on benefits that has been submitted. You'll see that there's a small change that the unallocated I've added so that we've got real sight of that, which I thought was helpful. We still have work to do, which is ongoing in terms of the benefits. So again, I've got a couple of people working on streamlining the benefits, because at the moment, for example, a really comprehensive piece of work Campbell has done, really comprehensive with the CJ community on their pieces of work and looking at and benefits mapping all of the different outputs from that. The difficulty is there's so many benefits, so we need to be better at streamlining them so that we can track, we can report. So work is ongoing to say, well, what is this streamlined way of measuring and identifying benefits? So just again to give you a flavour that that's work that's ongoing that will make a really big positive difference in that arena. So just a couple of things. I'll pause because I see DCC Smith has got her hand up.
Thanks, Breda. DCC Smith.
It was just to support Breda really in her articulation of that. I suppose having one portfolio for transformation, I think, has made a real difference in understanding the priorities across the organisation. I think we are going through the process at the moment of, as Breda describes, the prioritisation piece is really important. We haven't, I think, organisationally had that grip in terms of all of the change and transformation that's happening across the organisation. And as a result of that, we've got lots of projects and programmes that have happened across divisions, completely well-meaning, etc., but understanding what support those need, what impact they have, etc., what we stop, what we start, all of those questions are the discussions that we're having at the moment. I would like to be able to increase the change function in terms of resources to deliver our ambitious programme, but with budget constraints, etc., at the moment, we're having to kind of think about how we would do that moving forward and what that might look like. At the forefront of my mind and all of the work that we're looking at is what are the things that will create the most efficiency in the organisation, reduce demand, what are the digital and data enablers that we've got currently in the pipeline. The sequencing of that is really important, and you know, my team would talk about kind of we are investing in infrastructure at the moment that we haven't done over a number of years, and we've got to build those layers before we can do some of the really exciting data science programs, AI, etc., that we want to do, notwithstanding that work is absolutely ongoing at the moment, and we've seen the fruits of that, and it's really exciting. So I suppose for me, you know, supporting Breda and the team and Andrew and the team to kind of have that one picture right across the organisation has been really pivotal. And the prioritisation bit is hard, because everyone's programme is important, everyone's programme will make a difference, but understanding what the biggest impact will be on the front line is where we are, and those are the conversations that we're having. But I would say we're not quite there yet. November would be really good to be able to come and you know, discuss that with you and present that with you in a bit more detail in terms of those decisions that we're taking. But kind of the science behind the impact of programmes has been illuminating, I think, from my perspective. You know, Breda's used to working in that, but this is something that's shown me actually how important that is, and getting that right. So I guess we're on a journey is probably how I would describe it, and really good points in terms of prioritisation, Angela, and you know, board members, but it's something that we are really, you know, keen to get right, and make sure we're delivering for the front line and making communities safer, I think, with all of the work that we're trying to do. So thanks for the question.
Thanks very much, both. Colleagues, anything else in either transformation update or the Q1 benefits update? Angela?
Just briefly, and thanks to Breda and Bex for that. I think the prioritisation is going to be really, really important, and just making sure that resources are aligned to the things that we think are going to have the biggest impact and take us further forward in terms of realising the vision. But I wondered on the benefits, which, and I appreciate this is really difficult, but realising the benefits so that they can be articulated to say how the resource has been used differently would be really, really helpful. Because, you know, I think that quite often a lot of it, this is staff savings, and I know you're on a journey with this, but if we could just see a bit of, we've saved X in this area, this has enabled us to do Y that was, in the plan, or takes us further towards the vision. As I say, it's really, really difficult, but it would be really helpful, and it also avoids people continuing to do what they've always done, and you're not really getting the benefit of that resource that you've freed up. Thanks.
Thank you for the question. So, as a bit of a response, it reminded me that when Scott and I spoke maybe a month and a half ago, one of the ideas Scott came up with, which I think I shared and at the sort of pre-meeting for this with yourselves, was around us getting together and sharing with you exactly that. So getting people, particularly people where it has actually made a difference, to share some stories, to bring to life the powerful benefits that some of these programs of work have made. So that is something that I'd really value getting on the table to set up for yourselves to share some of that more real impact. So I think that's part of it. The other bit for me that's really important, and it's a really, really good question, because when you look at the numbers, it doesn't tell the full story, and particularly it doesn't help us to understand what difference is this making really. So one of the things that we've been working on is, and I've got sort of shared this with Scott, sort of a plan for it, is in terms of efficiency and building frontline capacity. There's an awful lot of different pieces of work that are going to make a real difference in this area. And in the past, we've looked at all of those, not really in isolation, but kind of separately. And often they impact on one another. Often even programs of work, I know we've had change requests in the past because we're shifting where benefits are allocated to, which is just not right. So we need to get better at identifying for different work streams what's the benefits, but also making sure that there's no duplication across that. So we've got a plan which all the DCCs, ACCs directors, we've all bought into, which is it's sort of a process on a page, but it shares these are all the different work streams that will make a difference to driving benefits in terms of efficiency, in terms of building frontline capacity. We know who's sort of leading each of those, and we've got a working group that's going to be sitting underneath that, which is going to be led by the DCCs. It's got representatives like ACC mayors is on it from operational policing. And the purpose of that group is to look at all of the different proposals from these work streams that will make a difference in terms of efficiencies, in terms of benefits, to make decisions. The DCCs will be the decision makers on what we move forward. And then in terms of transformation, our role will be to support people to identify the streamlined benefits. So that part, the streamlining of the benefits, is important first. So we'll be helping the workstream leads to identify their benefits, understand how to baseline, understand how to track, and importantly, we're also there to coordinate and make sure there's not double counting or duplication. The important thing, and linking really a bit more specifically, Angela, to your question in terms of tracking, reporting, working out what's really happened, is transformation will consolidate, will coordinate. If it's operational policing impact, in terms of hours or in terms of numbers, that will be fed into DCC Jane Connors, into her operational policing management board, specifically because that's the forum to make a decision about, well, if we've got these savings, where is it best that we reallocate, so that we're setting up a process to ensure that we streamline our benefits, support areas with identifying them and properly tracking them. So rather than you've just got a few slides at this forum with a few numbers on them, we can give you more real data on this is the difference it's making, and this is what's happening to if it's sort of frontline policing. So just to give you hopefully a bit of confidence that that process has been worked up, You know, my belief is it will, over the next couple of months, make a real difference in this area. Hopefully that's helpful.
Thanks, Breda. I see DCC Smith and ACC mayors want to come in too.
Thanks, Chair. Just a couple of things. So I absolutely get your point, Andrew, around consequences, impact in terms of when we do something, we deliver something. What does it mean for a cop? You know, kind of how does it make their life easier? What does it feel like in terms of using a new piece of tech or kit or what have you? So the digital team have done quite a lot of work around that, and actually we had a presentation from a PC around COS and the impact of that, and it was brilliant because it was really illuminating in terms of how he felt, the difference it made in terms of his working practice, the time it saved, just sort of simple talk through in terms of what a difference it had made to his working life. And I thought it was really impactful, and I've asked for that to be pulled through to board members. And I think when he presents it, it really brings it to life, if that makes sense. The Body Worn video team have done the same thing. They've gone out and got kind of stories and, you know, kind of they've done videos with officers to sort of showcase kind of what a difference that's made to them. So we're definitely starting down that path in terms of the so what bit is so important, because we often talk about hours saved or headcount or money, and actually this stuff is about making it easier for our cops and staff every day to be able to do their jobs, and being able to describe that to you is something that, you know, we really want to be able to do. So we are on that journey at the moment, and we'll bring that through so that you can see that too. And using the officers and staff themselves as opposed to us talking about it, I think is really impactful too. So thank you.
Thanks. I'm sure we'll be really interested in hearing those stories. Thank you. ACC mayors?
Yeah, very quickly. I think that this probably has been one of the biggest frustrations of the SPA, I think, over the years, is our ability to do this. We'll touch on it under the business case, but in many times what you're seeing here is one side of the equation. The other side of the equation is what are the demands sitting on broadly on our local policing. And the truth of that is, we know that in many cases our officers have been working in excess of 100%. So if I give them an hour back in a day, that's consumed almost immediately by additional demand that they weren't getting to. And secondly, it's inconsistent across the country. It'll be different in different places because our resource model wasn't informed by demand. It's informed by a range of historical factors. So one of the benefits of now consciously designing our local policing model, which is the first time we've done that, is we're now picking up a lot of the processes that have been introduced over the years and saying, hold on a second, you're meant to be doing these searches on your mobile phone, for example, but only 20% of the people in this division are doing that. Why is that? So can we revisit that? That is now your process. There are alternate processes. We're shutting them down. You are required to do that because that's where the benefits come from, and then calculate the numbers based on the refined processes. So in many cases, we've introduced a lot of new technical innovations into the divisions, but we've never changed the business model to either enforce it or encourage it. So we'll be in a position where we'll have direct benefits for local policing, where we're saying because of the model there's direct things, but actually we're also saying that we're now consciously embedding in a lot of the things that have had benefits attached with them. And hopefully moving forward, working with Breda, we will be able to say this division has this many officers to deliver this business process. If we make that process more efficient, then we're taking 10 and moving them over here to do something different. So it's always been that connection between demand and resource. It has meant it's been really hard for us to tell you the so what, but hopefully we'll be able to fix that. Hopefully.
Thanks very much. Look forward to hearing more about that in November. Alistair, thanks for your patience.
No problem, Chair. And I think Angela pressed in on the question that was really interesting me here, and the responses we've had from ACC mayors and DCC Smith. They've been really helpful. But I just stress that, seeing both sides of the equation, but that transparency and where is this additional capability going, and how's it meeting the demand is something that is really important, I think, not just for us to see, but for the public to see as we move towards Vision 2030. My other question really was, when you look at the slides that actually show us the cashable benefits, and also the officer time efficiencies and the staff time efficiencies, one of them's amber and two of them are red, which doesn't, you know, as has already been explained, necessarily tell the full picture. But I just wonder what the thoughts were with Police Scotland about the way these are presenting, and what steps they've taken to move them towards green.
Rita, you want to come in on that?
Yeah, your bit about the way it's presented, personally, I'd love to overhaul, I'm being honest, the benefits reporting that we do. I think a lot of the information is duplicated in a few different forums. We've added, as you can see on the one with cashables, we've added a little purple line now, so you can see the unallocated. And I think you're quite right, as you look at the red, it doesn't tell the full picture, because often if I look at the COS, there's change requests that will shift that. For me, and this is hopefully all right to say, you know, when I look at the way that we do change requests, if things shift, we do a change request to bring the benefits back in line, and then they report green again. So often they're red while we're awaiting a change request. And questions that I keep asking is what's getting us to the point where we need the change request. So often when we're looking at ones that are green, Alistair, that's, you know, sometimes because we had a change request that's brought it back in line, rather than we're in line with what we originally expected. So from my perspective, you know, in terms of other organisations, we would monitor benefits versus the original case, rather than raising change requests to get it back in line. So I think the picture is a bit complicated, and I think you're right, it doesn't tell the full story. So, you know, personally, I'd like to refresh how we look at benefits, which is what we're looking at the moment, and we will run it all by Scott to check that it meets your requirements. That's my honest kind of response to that. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you.
Yeah, if I can just come in there, that would be really helpful, Breda. There was a workshop with the Resources Committee members way back in January, and we made that request at that time, that we overhaul how we report on benefits realised.
Thank you.
Thanks. Alistair, do you want to come back in?
No, but I see that the DCC and the ACC have got hands up. I don't know if it was in relation to this.
Okay, we'll bring them in. DCC first.
Yeah, it was, and I agree with you, Alistair. I don't like this method of reporting. I think it doesn't tell the story properly. So it's definitely work in progress, and Breda and the team are looking at how do we do that in a more effective way, and the storytelling is one of those. The data clearly is really important too, but being able to present that to you in a way that makes more sense and shows the impact and the consequences and all of those things, which I think are really important around transformation, is something that we're really committed to. So we'll continue to develop that. We're not quite there with it yet, Alistair. I think it's still a bit of a work in progress. We're trying to kind of go back retrospectively on programs of work that we've had to understand, you know, how we can do that from forwards, but also backwards too, to give you that reassurance as a committee around that. So I would say bear with us. We're nearly there, and we will, you know, we will do that with you. So yes, I completely agree.
Thank you.
Thanks. And ACC mayors?
Yeah, it's just, sorry, it's a bit of an obvious statement. I think one of the other issues that has clouded this is the operational reality, which is dropping from 17,234 officers to 16,600 officers, and then to 16,500 officers without redesigning our services, has basically meant that in a lot of cases where there are efficiencies like this, they're just offsetting the fact that we've had to take officers out of the model. So in many cases, we're not able to demonstrate that we're returning anybody to the front line, but we have actually offset the fact that with very little notice, we had to cut our numbers. So that is an adding complication.
Yeah, absolutely, and obviously important that we really could try and track all that through too. Colleagues, many thanks. Breda, thanks to you and the team and everybody else on the call for the contribution. Really important agenda in terms of change and transformation and the benefits realisation. So we welcome the work and that's planned, and we'll get a further update as we've requested in November. Thanks very much. That takes us on to item 5.1, which is the procurement annual report. Ian, many thanks to you and your team for compiling this. Over to yourself, please.
No bother. I'll keep this as brief as possible. So I was on my notes, which have now disappeared. Sorry, folks, give me 2 seconds to get back to all my notes. But sorry, I need to apologise. My system seems to be not taking me where I want to go. All my notes have disappeared from my screen anyway. So look, the annual report, this meets all our statutory requirement. I did have stats to give you, but they have just now disappeared off my screen, so apologies for that. No idea why. And I mean, we cover off a range of community benefits. We were really busy last year. We've put in all the work for next year, which is at the point of making the report is almost double the spend contract value level. I think we're about 400 and something million in contract value. Sorry, my screens are just going blank. But at least double the contract value for going into this year than we were last year. But that's mainly due to really the top. We've got kind of like a top 5 cover something like almost 200 million. We've got new driver, I think they call it diversionary training from memory. That's about a £60 million contract. We've got procurement card contracts, fuel card contracts. So we've got some real multi-million pound contracts that are in the list there. You will be able to see them, but they add up to about 200 million. So it's just the timing of some of these new contracts. So I'm just going to have to try and shut things down, or I'll just not be able to do anything. So it's just a summary of that. I'm sorry I can't give you a brief because everything's just disappeared from my other screen at the moment. So I think that's probably all I can say. Busy team, resources are getting there, but the annual report does everything we need to do. We've reviewed our procurement strategy. We meet all the criteria we've set out in the procurement strategy for last year. We've now introduced the new one, and we'll then, hereafter our next annual report, we'll review the current procurement strategy and how we're doing against that. But unfortunately, I think that's the best summary I can give at this point from memory. I can't give you my stats, but it's in a really strong position.
Well done, impressive without having your notes to hand there, Ian, but it's an impressive year as well. And last time round, we had the 6-monthly update too, which was really impressive in terms of the good work that the team's doing, and really helpful to hear about the capability and capacity that you've been building up, recognising what's ahead too. Colleagues, any comments or questions on the annual report for procurement? Alistair?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thanks, Ian. Absolute nightmare losing your notes. But we have read it, and it is, you have delivered, you and the team. So, thanks to everybody for that. What I wanted to just really comment on is this is a significant spend of public money, and not only does it enable and help to deliver policing services, but there are wider community benefits. And on page 17, it actually lays out the community benefits summary, I think, extremely well. So that, if it's the right term, added value that procurement are ensuring is being delivered for this public money spend, I think warrants commenting on. So well done for the overall delivery, but I just wanted to draw that out as well. That was it. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Alistair. Tom?
Thanks. Just to reinforce that, Ian, the professionalism around procurement since you've come on board is notable, and the report is very good and helpful. Just one point around a compliance assessment. paragraph 2 in the report, and specifically around 2.2, which is around compliance monitoring and assessment of compliance against the competency framework and the maintaining compliance. The report would benefit from telling us what was the outcome of those assessments. You know, you tell us about the activity of compliance, but are we compliant is a big question.
Yeah, sorry, it's the wording Scottish Government like to see in the papers that go out, but our compliance across the board to utilisation of contracts is really high. We're sitting at 98% to compliance to contract and compliance to a procurement strategy, which that is part of. You really just make the statement that we're fully compliant to the procurement strategy. So on competency matrix, so we train to the Scottish Government competency matrix, so we've got to evaluate all our staff that carry out procurement as delegated by yourselves to us. They all have to go through a standard competency matrix, and we follow that structure, and then that feeds into the My Career and identifies any gaps. And so at the moment we kind of follow this a national procurement competency matrix, and then we feed it into My Career, and that part of it is fully compliant. And then the competency across the board for the procurement strategy is that we're fully compliant. It's just the wording doesn't lead you to give the detail. They're just saying make the statement in the report. So it's as the request, I guess, but it's in a good position.
Okay, thanks. Maybe even in the accompanying paper to the committee, be able to put something in there that it just gives us that assurance, which you've just done. So thank you.
Yeah, no, sorry, Tommy. It's a fair point, and we'll maybe change that for the next one.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ian. Angela.
So again, just to reiterate, the report's really useful, really good, really comprehensive, Ian. So well done. The performance is great. And I suppose one of the things that did strike me was the way that you're trying to spread the economic benefit of the spend that you've got, and that work that you're doing in community wealth building is really impressive. It perhaps is a model that other organisations, other national, regional, whatever organisations could adopt, because it takes a lot more time to actually look at where the contracts could go that would provide that economic benefit for communities that perhaps are most disadvantaged. So at some point it might be useful for us to hear a wee bit more about that and some of the successes that you've had. But thank you.
No problem. Again, I'll probably pull that out then on because they don't want to see it in this paper going out, but we would pull that, I think, on our performance report then. And it may be to Tom's point as well. We do the same then. We kind of draw out some of those kind of performance pieces relative to the annual report, so that we can dissect it slightly more than what we were asked to do in that paper by the Scottish Government. But that's a great point, and I think that's where I probably want to catch that then. Sorry, I'm trying desperately to get some of my notes back here.
I think it would be useful. Sorry, Pauline. I just think it would be useful really flagging that for the Scottish Government, because I know that there are various divisions that are really keen to be pursuing that and doing a lot more to really enhance that economic activity, particularly in our small, rural and disadvantaged communities. So thank you and well done.
Yeah, and just to finish off, it is quite challenging for us. So if you say, so this is a major drive from Scottish Government, there's policy around it, we introduce it and have it as part of our sourcing strategy, etc. And you try to build it in, but it is a challenge when you are looking at national, quite large contracts to get it to specific zones. It is quite difficult when you're dealing with a provider that's perhaps based in England and then they're delivering to the whole of Scotland, and how do you dissect that up and who gets what? So there's some challenges there, but we're considering it everywhere we can. But I've taken a note to put that and look at building something more to both the points there and to the performance report.
Thanks very much, Ian. And I think, as others have said, you know, really impressive report. And yeah, we should be sharing the good work with others across other services and public services and beyond in Scotland too. So well done. Keep me right here. We're asked to approve this for publication. Yes.
Yes.
Yep. Members content to approve. Yep. Thanks, Ian.
Thank you. Much obliged. Thank you.
Thank you. Colleagues, item 6 is the Resources Committee work plan. As you can see, Deborah's tried to populate this as best she can based on what's known about at the moment, but it would be really helpful if colleagues are aware of any other issues or items to come, particularly in the areas at the bottom of the second page, business cases, change control, end project reports. If you could let her know so that she can manage the agendas effectively going forward too, that would be much appreciated. Meantime, people content to note the work plan? Okay, thanks very much. Just before concluding the public business, I want to take the opportunity to acknowledge that this is James's last meeting. James Gray, our Chief Financial Officer, last meeting of the Resources Committee. James, as you all know, leaves Police Scotland next month to take up a new role. James, your contribution to this committee and the financial management of policing over many years has been absolutely integral in terms of meeting our financial commitments, and you've been a real driving force in delivering continuous improvement within and across the organisations. Your support, your commitment to governance and transparency has allowed this committee to provide effective oversight, scrutiny and assurance to our board and all significant financial and budgetary resourcing matters with a huge amount of confidence. And no, in this short time, we don't have the opportunity to list all your contributions, and I'm sure you would blush if we did do that, but the governance and oversight of policing budget is in a really strong place today because of your good work. And I know that you'd be the first to remind me that this has been a team effort, and part of your legacy will be the importance you've placed in developing the talent within your team. And I'm sure that we'll continue to benefit from this as they carry on the good work after you've left. I know that many of us are going to see you over the next few weeks and we'll have the opportunity to say our good wishes and our thanks in person to you. But as this is our last public meeting before you move on, I want to, on behalf of my fellow committee members, thank you for your service and wish you all the best and your family for the future. Many thanks, James, for your contribution. James, do you want to say a few words?
Just very briefly, just to say thank you very much for your kind words, and I agree, particularly around the point around it's the strength of the team. I think there's some really good colleagues in the service, and that good work will continue to go forward. But yeah, I look forward to catching up with most of you over the coming weeks before I leave, and I've really enjoyed working with current and past committee members. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thank you. Colleagues, that ends our public session.